Success and Karen Gracie Equine Success. My apologies for being a few minutes late. I had some tech issues, which like to visit me quite often. It was all echoing. So when I popped on, there was this echo coming through the live stream. Yeah, I had to go back, reboot out, and log back on. I just make sure everything is on here, that I'm in the screen. Let's just see if... Oh, that's if we have some chats. I might not put that on at the moment. Just checking my settings and making sure everything is good. Now, this is our weekly Q&A live stream. So I'm in Facebook and on YouTube. Well, I should be. If you're popping on, let me know where you are, who you are. I think I've said it that your name comes up if you want your name to show, but I'm not sure. Text still gets me all the time. And when you pop on, what you can do, if you have a question you'd like to ask me and a topic you'd like me to talk about, just pop it in the comments and I'll answer it for you as best I can. And yeah, introduce yourself. I didn't actually have, sorry, I'm just checking settings here. I think everything's good. I didn't actually have any questions for this week's live Q&A. So I've always got something to talk about, but I do have something I want to chat about. But if you do pop on and you have a question you'd like to ask, or if you're struggling something with your off the track thoroughbred, let me know and we can have a chat about it. So let me just pop down here. I've got dogs everywhere here. Okay. So I wanted to give a warm welcome to all our new members in the Facebook group. We've actually had quite a big influx of new members lately. So thank you for joining. It's lovely to have you here. If you don't know, I'm back doing a weekly Q&A, which is now on YouTube as well as Facebook. And yeah, I always put up a reminder beforehand. And if you have any questions you'd like to ask me, either in the Q&A or if you can't make it, it's always sometimes good to pop it in beforehand if I need to. Sometimes I might do some research or find out a little bit more for you. Pop it in the comments when I do a reminder in the Facebook group. But yeah, if you have a question or just want to say hello, pop it in the chat. And what I wanted to do, as I said, I didn't have a question for today, is talk about a topic that seems to be comes up all the time. But I'll just sit here and wait for a few more people to hop on and make sure. I'm a bit disorganized this morning. That's what happens when you have 19 horses and 6 dogs. Went out to bring the horses in and give them their hay and then run back. And then I had some tech issues with doing that funny echo sound. So I had to log out and log back in. So I've got my coffee here and just waiting for some people to pop on. If you're new to the group or new to my YouTube channel, let me know. It'd be great to meet you and you can introduce yourself. I always have my coffee here for my live. So I was doing lives all last year, actually. Last year was a little bit chaotic for a lot of us. And I've got a paid program as well. So I've got what is called the Off the Track Thoroughbred Success, which has been a big project for me and that's still growing. And so I do a weekly Zoom live coaching Q&A in there every week as well. So it's all about time management, isn't it? And creating content. I have one course that goes with the program and also another course that I'm working with and uploading lessons within the academy as well, all to do with retraining your off the track thoroughbred, retraining. Now we're working on the retraining, the practical application, so using equitation science. So lots of lessons. I have lots and lots of videos to get up there and also on YouTube. For those who don't know, I use equitation science, is popping this down here, equitation science principles in my retraining, all my horse training, and I'm currently studying the equitation science diploma. I also spent a year down there many years ago, so love equitation science, and I think it's a wonderful opportunity to increase the welfare, not only with our off-the-track thoroughbreds and in thoroughbred racing, but through all equestrian disciplines. And my dogs are probably going to bark here. Bailey, come here. Always have dogs barking or doing. I have 6 dogs. They're so cute. They're my babies. So what I wanted to, unless I get a question, I wanted to talk about from one of our new members actually, and I see it all the time. People say my horses started off really quiet, and he or she started off really quiet, but they started spooking and started having, behavior issues, very hyperreactive. And I quite often see this with a lot of members of the group, and a lot of people reach out to me, and my horse is spooking, my horse is shy, my horse is running backwards and this and that. And I always say, the first thing you want to look at is, what are you feeding your horse? So equine nutrition is so important. And I've been there myself. I didn't, I got my first off the track thoroughbred back in 1998, 99, and it was a big grain feeder. Unless you're taught otherwise, you sort of follow the mainstream and follow what people are doing, follow what your trainer's doing, follow what the barn's doing, the stables are doing. And also there's a lot of marketing with these feed companies, a huge amount of marketing. And I've noticed particularly overseas, over in the US and the UK, the feeds, they've got really good marketing, these big companies like Purina and Strategy, and the feeds themselves are quite often so detrimental for horses. And equine nutrition is one of my passions, part everything. When you're taking care of horses, and particularly with off the track thoroughbreds, a lot of rehabilitation is involved, and healing the gut and equine nutrition is a big part of it. So you need to learn about what horses are designed to eat and what you're feeding them now, and looking at, as they've come from racing, they usually have a compromised digestive system and compromised gut health. So they are fed a high concentrate, high grain diet in racing, and horses aren't designed to eat grains. They're not designed to have high starch diets. Their digestive system isn't designed to be able to handle that type of feed. And because it's not designed that way, yet we still feed them that feed, it becomes very compromised. And not only does it affect them physically, but it also affects them mentally. It creates behavioral changes. High grain feeds, or grain in itself, can create behavioral changes. And there's one feed in particular that can change your horse massively, and that is wheat. So when I see comments like, I'm really struggling with my horse, they've become very spooky and on edge, and then that affects you as the rider, the owner. The first thing I look at is, what are you feeding them? And more than often, I see wheat in the horse's diet, particularly with some of these brands overseas. I'm in Australia, so you've got Purina, and nearly all of them overseas that are well marketed tend to have some form of wheat or wheat byproduct in it. And I've been down the path, as I said, I'm really passionate about equine nutrition. One of the reasons for this is I've had a disaster. I'll just tell you briefly about my story. I got my first off the track thoroughbred back in 1999, and then my second horse in 2000. I had a pony when I was younger, but didn't know anything back then. I had him for a long while, but that's a different story. I had him in my 30s still, God bless him. But I was working in a riding school and equestrian centre in Sydney when I first got my two more serious horses, and started working full-time in the industry at the same time, or just a little bit beforehand. And so back then, which was what, the early 2000s, we were still feeding. Like, I ended up managing a riding school there and taking care of all the horses, and we'd make these big wheat bran mashes for them every week. I can't remember the feed we were feeding them, but it would have been some pellets, all these pellets that we feed. And I fed my horse grain. I remember my thoroughbred, we used to feed pollard. He had terrible reactions to pollard. He would come out in these huge hives. And so then he was, the vet put him on steroids. It was never put down to the feed. In fact, the feed was never looked at. And so I never looked at it. I mean, I can't remember whether I did put two and two together and notice that when the hives came out, it was because he was getting pollard. But, pollard, and back then wheat bran, and in the earlier days, that was very known. Horses started getting big head because it was from bran, all the bran that was fed to horses, which is high phosphorus, and ended up causing calcium deficiency in the horses. But feed wasn't really sort of looked at. I never remember being taught about equine nutrition or feed, or and I had some very good coaches. Like, I had high-level eventing coaches. I had high-level show jumping coaches throughout, even 10 years further down the track into 2010, and entering into racing. Well, racing, it's very big. Race horses are on a very high starch, high grain concentrate diet. And that sort of ended up, contributing to how I fed my horses off the track. I also ran my own racehorse spelling business, where I was a big grain feeder with them. They got their barley, always high, lots and lots of hay and that. But yeah, they always had hay and grass, but it was always a big grain diet. And no one ever told me otherwise. No one ever said, look, this behavior or these conditions may be diet related. And it was only up until, and I'm thinking it was only really until recently, when I say recently, I started looking more into equine nutrition. And the first thing that triggered me off was my one of my horses, and this was in 2013, 14, my beautiful Toby, thoroughbred cross stock horse, got acute laminitis, really bad, where he nearly died. And I remember feeding him. He had what I thought was an abscess, but he also had, when you look at his body, he had pockets of sort of fat. He was a good doer. He had pockets of sort of fat, and he was sort of cresty in the neck a little bit. And he had an abscess come up, and it wouldn't heal. But what I thought was an abscess was him sort of low grade laminitis. Well, he did have an abscess. Well, that ended up being more than an abscess. But I had him on green pasture. He had grass, and I was also feeding barley. So I was feeding big barley feeds to my horses. I had Moto. I've increased my herd by then, my team of horses, to probably about 6 or 7 I had then. They all got barley. They all looked really good, with their grain feeds and all of that. So they all had weight. They all look good. They all look shiny. But you're real like grain feeds. Been working in racing. I'd been working in racing started in racing in 2004. And we're looking at 10 years later, 2014, still feeding grain feeds. I'm looking back now, 2012, 13, 14. One of my other horses, Tommy, would have these behavior issues where he would head flick. And in spring in particular, and I always thought it was little bugs that was annoying him. And that was diet related, pasture related. But looking back now and seeing all these behavior problems, and obviously laminitis, that was brought on by the high starch and then grass on top of it. So the first kick in the butt I had was when my horse nearly died from laminitis. And I had him immediately. My vet told me, and my farrier told me to remove all grains, all sugars and everything. And he was just on soaked lucerne hay. And then put him on zero, which is a high, I think it was high gain, like, your zero low starch feed once he got out of his laminitic attack. But soaked chaff with a bit of salt and minerals in it, and his soaked lucerne hay. It was incredible to get him through it. Oh, and on top of that, he had to have surgery through it because what I thought was an abscess was a sequestrium, so it was dead pedal bone, which was probably triggered off by the laminitis. To cut a long story short, he came through. And I haven't got him now, but he passed away in 2017 from a tragic accident. But that's nothing to do with the laminitis or anything like that. He was healthy otherwise, other than very sad situation. I found him drowned, but we won't go into that one. That was absolutely heartbreaking. And so he triggered off. So Toby getting that terrible laminitis triggered off my research into obviously sugar and laminitis and all of that. And then going Modo, my other horse, my long-term horse, which was my off-the-track thoroughbred, he ended up getting Cushing's disease. And God bless him. He was also the one that was, used to get hives way back in the early days. He was on high grain, high starch. Looking back, he showed a lot of discomfort. I wasn't even told about equine ulcers or gut. Looking back throughout all my show jumping lessons, my big clinics with Olympic level show jumpers, he would stand there and stretch out, which was a sign of gut pain. Not one of them mentioned that he had gut pain. Like he wanted to urinate, not what, and I wasn't experienced back then at all. I started off as a novice back then. And so, no one mentioned to me that's a sign of gut pain. And it was never recommended by my vets or coaches or anything, checked for gastric ulceration. And so he really, he would have had, God bless him, poor little bugger, would have had probably ulcers all the way through his whole time with me. But putting that aside, he also ended up with Cushing's disease. And I lost Modo when he was 18. And he ended up getting Cushing's. He turned into a big curly furry ball. I found out too, diet is really high monitoring, is also with all your equine metabolic diseases. It's all diet related. And Modo ended up passing away from liver failure. Now, the liver failure would have been from it would have been diet related. Not only the Cushing's that he had would have put a lot of stress on his body, but pasture, mycotoxins, the whole lot. So I lost both my horses. Suffered terribly from diet related issues. So one of the reasons why I'm really passionate about nutrition. Then in my most recent times, I've had a nightmare situation with pasture related issues with my horses who are down in a cooler climate near Canberra, yet I got a whole herd of horses with big head. This is all pasture related. It's caused from severe calcium deficiency. They're not supposed to get it down here. It's usually related to oxalate pastures. That's been a huge learning curve for me as well. It's been really hard. I've been struggling about for the last 3 years. So yeah, another issue, another problem and a hurdle to overcome, which has been a massive learning curve for diet. So without going into all my problems, diet, equine diet. What are you feeding your horse? Do you have behavior problems? Learn about, as soon as you get your off the track thoroughbred or any horse, need to learn about equine nutrition, diet, how the horse's digestive system works, what they're designed to eat and what they're not designed to eat, and gastric ulceration, which is a massive problem with our horses, and especially with the modern diet and the way that we have the horse management nowadays. So when you get your off the track thoroughbred, are you feeding a feed that contains grains? Now, if your horse starts spooking, particularly if they've already spooking or they've were quiet when you initially got them and now they're starting to become spooky and flighty and shying, the first number one step is what you're feeding them. If you look at the ingredients, quite often these feeds don't have the ingredients list, but you'll find that a lot of them will have a wheat grain in it, wheat byproduct, mill run, mill mix, any wheat byproduct is going to be detrimental to your horse in some way. If it's not coming out in behavior issues, it is going to compromise digestive health, because wheat is a grain for a start. Even the wheat byproduct is still grain based. It's a grain. A lot of these feeds are advertised as grain-free and healthy for the gut. Wheat or any wheat byproduct or any grain byproduct is not healthy for the gut, for the horse's digestive system. And wheat is a very high in starch. It is it's high in sugars and very, very the sugars are rapidly absorbed into the bloodstream. The sugars rapidly go through to the system, where it's then ends up in the pancreas. The pancreas releases insulin. And it can cause a lot of problems. It can cause insulin resistance. Wheat is one of the only foods that can create behavior changes, neurological changes in the horse. And this can come out in hyperreactivity and hypersensitivity. Bailey, no barkies. Dogs are barking. Bailey, come here, mate. Come on. And this is one of the reasons for the spookiness and the shying. So I have seen dramatic changes in horses that have, had behavioural issues, been on edge, showed anxiety, and they've been found to have been having wheat in their diet through one of these feeds, usually the Purinas, pellets, these marketed feeds. Come here, guys. Come on. Sorry about the dogs barking. Chrissy, Ruby, in here. Good girls. And as soon as the feed is removed from the diet, Chris, come here. Come on, Rube, inside. As soon as the feed is removed from the diet, then the horse will literally settle down within 3 to 5 days. There's been dramatic improvements in the horse. So, the number one step, quite often, I'm saying quite often a lot in this live, but it is quite often when horses are shying. And a lot of the times, people who take an off the track thoroughbreds are novice. They don't know a lot about horses. So you've got the pressure of your trainer or other barn people saying, no, it's not the feed, it's this and that. You just need to give them more turnout time, or need to show them respect, or some training type of thing. And this poor horse is off its head from food-related issues that they have no control of, and it's completely ignored, and they're being told that it's something else that's causing it. The number one thing you need to look at when you have behavior issues with horses is, what are you feeding your horse? It's like with children, or ADHD, hyperreactivity in children, and quite often this is put down to diet and the modern diet of the human population. And it's the same with horses. Feed and types of feed will neurologically affect horses. And that's the first step you need to look at, especially with off-the-track thoroughbreds, where their gut has been compromised from the high concentrate, high grain diet in racing. Now, in saying this, you do not feed, even in racing, where the horse has to work and is expected to perform at maximum physical exertion. The amount of energy it needs, the amount of energy the horse needs, the racehorse needs to get those muscles moving, is the reason that they have a high concentrate grain diet. And we still, in racing, do not feed wheat. I have never seen in a racehorse's diet, this is in Australia, wheat in a racehorse's diet. It's fatty feed. And yet these poor horses that come off the track, these off the track thoroughbreds, are plummeted with this horrible filler, a wheat byproduct. It's just a filler. It's as cheap as anything that these feed companies use to pack into a feed. It will make your horse fat. It may make your horse shiny. It will make your horse look like it's, putting on weight. And it's just like jamming your body yourself with all this white bread. But it's worse for the horse because they're not designed to have grain. Our stomach can digest grains. The horse's stomach can't. And so the horse's digestive system, I should say. So your horse may look great on these Purina Seniors, the Purina Ultimate or whatever they are, but on the inside, it's not doing any good. And so I get really passionate about it. And the problem is when you come to a group like this, and I say, look, your feed is going to be one of the reasons that you may be having behavioral problems with your horses. And you've got all these people around you, trainers, your trainer, other people in the barn, and that saying, no, it's not. And they're all feeding this feed and all their horses are fine. It's really hard to go against the grain. And I know I've worked in racing for 2 decades, and going against the grain in racing is, in such an established and insular environment, which is still very behind the times in a lot of ways. And I, with a lot of things, equine welfare and so many things, but I started speaking out, and we learn by experience. And so it is very hard to go against the grain. So what you want to do is you want to arm yourself with some knowledge. Now, if you start to get into the educational seminars of, gastric ulceration, and there's a Dr. Ben Sykes. So there's sites on there. He's a world-renowned veterinarian who's done a lot for gastric ulceration. So you arm yourself with information from him. He's got a Facebook group, and say, this is what Dr. Ben Sykes has, and he's done world studies through universities and everything. My experience, I've linked up with, I'm not an equine nutritionist, but I'm in a forum, like on a website with Dr. Nerida Richards, who has Feed Excel. She doesn't talk about wheat in particular, but it's very known throughout the modern day equine nutritionists are up to date with equine science and equine nutrition, that grain diets are detrimental. Dr. Nerida Richards will talk about these marketing companies that are hiding these wheat byproducts and grain byproducts in the horse's diet, in their feeds. So if you arm yourself with some knowledge and just get some evidence-based papers, reach out to me. I can find some research papers for you. And if people say, no, you're being told wrong, you can say, well, look, this is the research. You'll go through horses that are fed high grain diets, and what's the level of gastric ulceration in these horses? What's their hindgut acidosis? Do they have hindgut acidosis? So there's a lot of information out there that will prove that grain-based diets are detrimental for horses. You can, the only time you need to feed any type of grain to a horse is, and this is if they're elite athletes that need the energy to perform high-level eventers, thoroughbred racehorses, trotters, standardbreds in racing, and then, only then, you can monitor it. And this is where, science comes in, and more education and that, where you can monitor it, where you can still cut down the amount of grain in the diet and substitute the energy needs with these super fibers, like, your lupin hulls and your lupins and your beet pulps and oils and fats and that. So there is not one reason to feed a off-the-track thoroughbred grain. Nothing, no reason. If you've got grain or a grain byproduct in your diet, there is no reason to feed your horse that, your off-the-track thoroughbred that. Unless they're up competing at high levels. And I'm talking about high level eventing, and, your Olympic sports and, show jumping. And you don't need to feed a dressage horse grain. You do not need to feed an off-the-track thoroughbred horse grain. So, and I know how hard it is to go against the grain, to go against what everybody else is doing. These marketing companies are really good at marketing these feeds as gastric support, but then you look at the first product, first ingredients in their product, and it's wheat middlings. And that's wheat middlings. That's the leftovers from the grain processing industry. And it's just, you've got bits of grain in there, you've got your wheat. It's horrible, horrible, horrible. And not only that, you have grain distillers and that which can contain these wheats, and these prepackaged feeds can contain mycotoxins. That's another topic. Molds, everything. So there is nothing positive about these prepackaged feeds that have all these byproducts in them, and that the only positive is for us, and it's convenient. It's not positive for the horse at all. It's only detrimental. And as I said, the marketing companies do a very good job at promoting these products. And so you have to be a bit of have an analytical mind and a researcher, or come across, a problem where your horse is blown out of its brain or dies, from like my horses, or Toby got the laminitis, and all 4 rotation and all 4 feet. The poor boy is just horrific. My vet was amazing. I was so determined to get him through it. And my moto, I ended up losing him to liver failure and Cushing. So all were diet related. So yeah, I come from a history of being through it and knowing, and my pasture problems now. And I've seen it. I've been through it. I've been through the struggle. And I do so much research on it all, on everything to do with horses and equine nutrition and everything. So, I think that's what I will focus this live on today. I've been chatting for about half an hour now. I don't want to leave it too long. I didn't have any questions come in. So if you have any questions, I'll pop this up as a replay, but pop it in the comments. Let me know if you've had any transformations from your horse. I know some of our members in the Facebook group have seen some wonderful transformations going from a diet that's had wheat in it, unknowingly. And then taken that out and seen just incredible positive changes in their horses, going from flighty, spooky, anxious to calm and relaxed. And it's so wonderful to hear it. And it's great to be able to stand up against these feed marketing companies and just say, look, you know what? We know what you're doing. Because they're making a pocket full of putting all these cheap fillers in. And promoting and doing advertising to promote them and selling them, triple the price more, quadruple the price of what it costs them to put these feeds together. So, look, I hope this has been helpful. And if you have any questions, put them in the comments, because I'll pop back at the replay. Remember that we have a weekly Q&A on Facebook and on YouTube every Thursday, 8 a.m. Australian time. 8 a.m. Australian Eastern Daylight Time. And I will see you in the next live. I will see you in the Facebook group or on YouTube. See you then. Bye-bye.